Iroquois have a tradition regarding the eagle. The eagle, their eagle, can take different forms, and at times it will take the form of the thunderbird. And this is really interesting. When it takes the level of the thunderbird, it is infused with something called orenda, which sounds a lot like the town that Harriet and I visited in California that had the Masonic and CIA, JFK kind of connections going on. But that word, orenda, is a power that allows you to heal, which might explain why, since Harriet and I have gotten together to study this phenomenon, that we've both moved into the healing professions. It was further believed that the thunderbird was capable, once the eagle changed into the thunderbird, it was capable of transforming from bird to human at will, and it was then the terrestrial counterpart of the orb or ball of light on the topmost branch of the celestial tree of light. Now this is really exciting because it might explain why with these balls of light that John Keel and others in Point Pleasant and my family and people in Woodward Drive were seeing. They were seeing a form of the Garuda. And the Tree of Light is interesting because I had a really incredible experience when I was being inducted into a Buddhist order. The night before I was inducted, I saw a Tree of Light. It was just an amazing, clear dream, very vivid. I've always remembered the details of it. And I saw, sitting in the branches of this tree, the different gurus that it turned out were in the lineage that I was being inducted into, because the next day we were shown a tree drawing that had the various gurus in the lineage in the branches of the tree. And I had seen this tree not as just as a tree, but as a tree made out. It was like a neon. It was like a tree made out of neon. In this book, we'll see just some interesting images of the Garuda. Here's an image of a clapper, which has the Garuda on one side and the human on the other side, and clap them together and you get the phenomenon. Here's another version of those clappers. Here's the Garuda headdress. Out from the Raven House in British Columbia. Here's an image of the eagle who took a human to be his wife. Image by Bill Reed of the Raven. Here's a clay aquat dance robe with the Thunderbird on the I just wanted to come back to these images again to mention that the Nunahi, the Thunderbirds and Thunderbeings led the Indians the fasting Indians or the spiritual Indians back to Pilot Knob. And whenever I drove by Pilot Knob, I had an intense feeling about it. So perhaps just from my connection to the Mothman, intuitively comes out when I come near a site that has some connection to it. In the next segment, I meet up with Ben Camp again, this time in downtown Albuquerque. Along with Ben is his cohort, Elario, who comes from a long line of native New Mexican medicine people. Apparently, Elario's brother is a medicine man and Elario is an apprentice. What I find interesting is that right before I arrived, Ben had a sighting of an apparition. And he talks about it here. It's ironic because earlier he was saying that he never has paranormal experiences and is quite a skeptic.
I got all scared and like the hair on my arm stood up, and I looked over and I didn't see anybody because it was all pitch black. So I finally got in my car and drove off, and I convinced myself that I was just spooking myself for like this, like pretend like I was watching a horror movie, right? But then when I came back, my hair still stood up on my arms, dude, for real. That's the honest truth, man.
What do you think? What do you think's going on?
I think I was trying to creep myself out, like psychologically, thinking that I saw somebody there when there wasn't even nobody there, you know?
You think it's your unconscious coming out?
But I thought I heard somebody there though, man. I don't know. I was jumpy when I got back. I couldn't do it psychologically, overcome my irrational fear of the unknown.
Maybe it's a psychic. Maybe you have a psychic link with someone. I had that happen once. I walked into my garage, our garage, a year or two after my father died, and I heard him speak to me. He said, "Hello, Andy."
Whoa. Yeah, I can't say
Clear as a bell.
I didn't hear any words, but I just thought I heard somebody there. But I don't know why I'd be scared. I would just walk over and take a look, you know?
One explanation is that my subconscious wanted to experience that again so badly, just to hear his voice, that it recreated his voice. It made it seem like it was outside of myself. What do you think about that?
I want to go get that jogger over there, man.
So the game of Go is a game that, unlike chess, a computer can't figure it out.
Exactly.
Does your dad have any theories? Do you have any theories on this? Because I know your dad's a Go master.
I think the game structure resides in momentum, which computers don't really understand. The momentum of the pieces played and what they imply. It's all about deceiving people and like taking advantage of their attacks, turning their attacks on themselves, basically.
Another guy who's in this film feels that that's an attribute that can be brought into the educational system somehow.
Well, yeah, my pop was really into teaching Go at this Waldorf schools in Seattle as a way to get kids thinking that way. That an advance doesn't have to be an advance for the enemy if you can turn it around, just like martial arts people do.
You know, there's a story about an Indian woman who the Mothman was coming down to eat the people there. So she went in the longhouse and she built a fire and she got some stones that were really hot. And when the Mothman came to the door, she acted like she was eating them. She picked them up and I went like this, but threw them behind her. And she said, "Oh, these are really good."
So he ate one.
So he bursts in and eats the rocks, and he's, you know, it teaches him a lesson and he never comes back again.
I like that.
I think that's sort of a similar idea. Elario, DJ Emeritus from Taos, is going to give us a slight short demonstration of his style.
Yo. In the midst, new company, clench fist, the structure stays clean. It's a Don Lope, keep claws sharp, engulf the smoke, one more verse. Closer I become, bill holder stacking funds, distracting those contracts undone. Sorry that I'm such a pimp, on a starry night, change the game flip. First was the decision, second was dedication, third was getting them to listen. Complications still glisten, no destruction to my vision. Change of thought, the game in my palm, this spot taken by only me. See that you're shaking, most controlled through greed. sit back, shift my sunglasses, sift through the lies in the madness. Hip hop's contagious, 5HK drip drop. How can I explain this? I've tried on a constant basis. Something like that.
See, I noticed the phrase in there, how can I explain this? And this is what we were talking about. First thing that we said to each other today was how can you really know what you're seeing is the truth? I think that sort of comes across in that piece you just did.
That places the Route 66.
And it places it in the realm of the paranormal as well. I don't know what happened, man. That's weird. We just had a case of the camera turning off by itself, so maybe there's some energy moving around.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe I was saying something. Maybe I was touching on a point that might make somebody else realize something. You never know what you're saying. I think it's all just sent from, there's a different energy out there not making us, but that we could choose to participate in. Whether you want to be if you know about it or not. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's interesting. The people that I've interviewed recently have all talked about the similar topics or similar aspects of this, and you were touching on it with the ideas about this inner struggle, and it's interesting. Another guy that I've interviewed really focuses on that as being the central motif of mystical experience, is the battle within yourself between good and evil, and he quotes Einstein, who said that after all of his theories and stuff, he felt like essentially that life was a struggle of good and evil. He also said that he thought creativity was more important, or that imagination was more important than knowledge.
Knowledge, yeah, I remember that.
But I just find those coincidences really interesting. It's like,
and I hardly like to say, good and evil, because then people right away take it in a religious sense and they say, well, the Christianity thing gets brought up, or, other things like that. But I truly believe that we're all similar. Look at us all, we're all similar, Like I was telling Ben today, he could tell you this, on the truth. I thought I had met you before somewhere. You looked familiar to me.
Really?
When we picked you up today, and I even told Ben that, I was like, I look like I've seen this guy somewhere before, or I've met him, or and we've never met.
That topic has come up this weekend because Harriet claims that she saw me in 2 places in Mexico, and I met her friend who was with her on that trip, and her friend was checking me out, like, man, that was you, but I wasn't there. I keep hearing from people that they saw me places.
I thought I had seen you somewhere.
I'm thinking maybe I'm a Manchurian astral projector. Somebody who just astral projects and they don't remember it, or
maybe we're all going the right way or the same way, or who knows? Maybe it's a sign of that, we're okay, or you never know. Like I said, I truly believe, if you just listen, you'll see what's real. But it's so hard to listen most of the time because, we're distracted with things like TV. Media, basically, I feel is the strongest, the strongest blanket over people's eyes nowadays. It's just the media controls basically, how we feel, what we should think about, like these things right here, this is like Jay-Z and 50 Cent, these are like this. These are like the image that the world portrays to our kids, a lot of kids around the world, they're sold by a dream like that, I'm one of them, and it's weird, who knows what it is. Maybe it's just a flaw to keep people, reaching for something that's not there, or maybe it's something, who knows,
Well, I think you're reaching for your higher self.
Yeah, or maybe it's a form of redemption, or maybe these are people that are sending wrong messages, it could be anything, really. It's hard to say, because I feel like once you start to pinpoint it, they change the program a little bit. That way, you can't really explain what's pinpoint it, because it keeps changing.
That's what happens with light. When they try to pinpoint light in a specific location, they find that it's moved. By the time they can pinpoint it, it's no longer light. It's like a particle.
Oh, right.
and while it's moving, it's a wave. So it's like the moment you observe it, it changes it.
And I feel that's what maybe this energy is, or maybe this truth that we're looking for. You know, as soon as you find it, it's going to change again, because you know there's a higher truth. You know, you got that it all like ties into, or
The higher truth of change, regeneration, and the cycle of life.
yeah, the cycle of life, whatever life is. You know, life is a dream to me. I said one time, you know, I go to sleep to rest, I wake up to dream, you know what I mean? I said that one time, just like, you know, talking to my friends, and that's like a crazy concept, you know, that most people go to sleep to dream, you know, and they wake up to like work or whatever. Like me, I go to sleep to rest, and I wake up dreaming, you know? Sometimes I can't believe that I was where I was yesterday, you know? I'm like, how did I survive that? Or was I really there? Or, you know, was that one of those out-of-body experiences? Or you never know what it was, you know?
Yeah, because time is always sort of in the now. So the minute you start to try to go back and put a concept on it, it's gone.
And one of my friends said that it's funny that you need time to reflect on time. You know, because we have this now, you know, but in a little while, you know, my time is going to take me somewhere else, you know, as will your guys'. Who knows where we'll be? Who knows if I'll even see you again, you know?
What are the two philosophies?
Well, I'm on the create your own reality side, which is creating your own control of reality. But if we have no control and we're just existing in a set of circumstances that toss us into circumstances that we don't choose, and the only judgment in life is how we deal with those circumstances, then you're not creating your own reality, you're just dealing with the obstacle course of life. That's if you want to look at them as oppositional to each other, you know?
Do you think that maybe you create your own decisions, though? You know, maybe you have control over your decisions, but maybe you don't have control over the whole process of the whole, you know, movement of the world. You know, maybe you get dealt with circumstances, but you do have a decision in those circumstances, and that's what you control, you know? Maybe
Exactly.
That could be another one. That could be another aspect.
I would concur with that. In an overall sense, you just arrived here. You didn't have any control over how you got here. Yet you do have control over some things, like your approach and so forth. You control your ego boundaries. You control decisions, good or bad.
You know, maybe you control where you're going to end up, you know? Even though we still don't know where we'll end up by making these decisions, but I think most of us try to say, well, you know, if I choose that, I'm pretty sure that that's going to happen, you know what I mean, or whatever, as a chain reaction. But in all actuality, maybe we just go with it, and, you know, all you control is basically your decision, just your decision in one split second, you know, to either say something, not walk, you know, smile, not smile, whatever it is. You know?
It's like you're another electronic chip in the flow. The electrochemical flow as it goes through each organism.
Yep.
Comes to you.
You know, who's to say that whatever you saw, or, you know, whatever your change of your life was, you know, wasn't something real. Like, just because it wasn't viewed by anybody else, you know, you yourself were there. You know, I've been in a few crazy places on drugs and off of drugs, you know. Like, I feel that drugs sometimes, you know, like in that aspect, you either, you know, it's kind of like the Matrix, you could either take the pill or not, you know? Yeah. And if you don't, who's to say that, you know, you'll just still be in, you know, your little controlled environment, you know, what I was talking about earlier, your controlled, comfortable zone, you know? Or do you choose to take the pill and take yourself out of that comfort zone, you know, and see where you end up after that, you know? Because I don't believe drugs destroy lives. I think people themselves destroy their own life, you know? They just choose to blame it on something else, you know? It's easier to say, you know, well, it was that made me, you know, than to rather say they were my own decisions that brought me to where I'm at, you know? That's what I think. One day, we were driving back from work, actually, and my friend's mom, my best friend's mom, she believes a lot in prayer, but I think, you know, like so do we all do, you know? And she basically kept telling us, you know, don't speed on your way home, don't speed. You know, she's all, and she prayed or whatever, and sure enough, like the whole way we kept like following this semi that we couldn't pass, and I think I'm the only one that noticed it in the car, but there was a little sticker on there that said, "We care," and like we couldn't pass this guy till we got like I think almost to Arroyo Hondo from Colorado. That's almost like 2-3 hour drive, you know. And when I finally said something about it to my friend, I said, look at that, it says we care. I said, but now it'll probably change because I said something, and sure enough, the truck like pulled off to the side, and we ended up passing them, and we ended up speeding, but we were almost in Taos, you know. And that's just like a crazy thing, the way that it was. I was able to point it out while it was happening, you know. I was like, watch that, and then as soon as I said something about it, it changed, you know. It was just like, because I brought somebody else's, you know, like I told somebody about it or whatever, you know what I mean? I don't know. Something like that.
Yeah, bring that awareness in, and then it makes the thing happen. 7 minutes.
Just a short one, man. Okay, this parable is a 2-page poem called "The Empty Boat," and I'll just paraphrase it, man. It says, if you're on a boat on a river, and there's another guy in another boat on the river, and he starts coming towards you, right? And you're telling him, hey, turn, you know, get out of the way. You're shouting at him, telling him to get out, telling him not to come towards you, and he still is coming towards you, right? And you get more and more frustrated because there's a guy in the boat, and you want him to turn his boat, and you get all pissed off, and you probably start screaming, you probably get emotional, and especially if he hits you, then you're even more upset, right? Because here's this dumbass guy that came, and he didn't listen to you when you told him to turn, and he hits your boat, and you're pissed off, man. That's the way I see it. Then you're what's that word we were using the other day? Exasperated. I don't know, maybe that was last night. Then you're exasperated. But if the boat's empty and it's coming towards you, you don't experience any of those emotions, because you wouldn't get angry if an empty boat's coming towards you. You see it as an event, as a curiosity or something. And then if the boat all of a sudden hits you, you're still not going to be angry because it's just a boat, even though it's the same thing happening, you know. So what the moral of that is, keep your boat empty in life, which means, and they say this in another way, the straightest tree is the first one to be cut down. So if you live your life and you try to embody, if you want your spirit to embody your body and to be the best among men, you know, the best among people, then your boat will not be empty. But if you just try to fit in with the average human spirit, and you don't strive for any kind of excellence at all, and you just strive for existence, not for excellence, then your boat's empty, and you can pass through life without harm, and you can walk through the valley of evil without being afraid. That, to put a Christian slant on it, you know what I mean?
That's crazy, because then you would think, like, well, what I think is like, how could you not want your own like existence, you know? How could you want to just be like part of the flow of everybody else, you know? Like you said, the straightest tree is probably the first one to be cut down, you know? Like I'm for all like putting your whole self in the boat, dog, because I mean, then nothing's controlling the boat. The boat's it's just an empty vessel, dog, and anything can take over the empty vessel. I feel if you like try to put I don't know, more meaning into your life, well then the world tries to take away that meaning somehow, you know, like they try to use everything against you, you know what I mean? Like it could go both ways, I guess, you know. That's the balance of life, I guess, you know. I'd rather have my boat full though.
Well, I would say it's more of having an empty boat means not being attached to the outcome. So you can still put everything into it and have a full boat that way, but not be overly attached to the outcome, not have any expectations about the outcome, and experience the whole process directly without conceptualizing. Because the minute you conceptualize on where it might go, then you're just wasting mental energy. It's best just to be, it's like when you're on stage, it's best just to be there on stage at that moment without any thought. In fact, if you don't do that, people will know, and they'll think you're a fake. So they want to see you in the moment.
See, and that's crazy, like, dealing with those moments, though, that you talk about being on stage, I can connect with that, because I've taken every single moment that God well, nah, I believe that it's God, you know, whatever God is. You know, people, you say God and they, you know, see a man sitting on a throne, whatever, you know. God to me is just like the essence itself. And I feel whenever those chances were put in my way, I took every single one and I made it whatever it was, you know. I tried to make it the best experience it could be. And I noticed that after those experiences, because there have been times that I've chosen not to be there, and there's, you know, most of the times I have, when I have, the outcome was totally different, you know. People look at you a different way. You start to somehow create their own thoughts. With your actions, you're creating their thoughts. Like you all of a sudden become something to them as like maybe a legend, something to look up to, something to believe in. You know, there's a lot of great people in this world that have died that people believed in, you know, that they believed in them, you know. They were almost ready to, they could probably have died for whatever they believed in, you know. And I think it was because maybe they knew something was shown to them that they had to express, and if they didn't express it, well then they might as well die anyway, you know. And if they did express it, they died because, you know, they were just basically here to do their job or not, you know. And either way you're gonna face death, either way, whatever death is, you know. Most of us are scared of it. I could say I'm scared of death, but only because, you know, nobody can sit here and tell me, you know, what's gonna happen after that, you know what I mean? And I think it's within myself when I'm finally, you know, ready to admit to myself what it is. I think that's probably when the transition will happen, you know, and nobody will even know. It'll just be like a blink, you know?
Yeah, really.
Just an ending to or maybe a new beginning to something, you know, an ending or a beginning, or both at the same time, you know?
Well, the things that you've been practicing along the way will just keep on happening.
True. And what if maybe you just leave your energy behind, you know, and you no longer have to be a physical, you know, and affected by the physical, you just are, or you were, or you have been, or you'll always be, or whatever, you know?
I'm just taking pictures. Indians becoming Mormons. Here we are at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And when you stand here in the center of the circular building, one of the big motifs you see is the Thunderbird. And over here we have the eagle, which, as we may recall, can take the form of the Mothman. Here we have a tile.
She does great. I don't know what she's doing. A video.
Still, but it's digital video. Mickey tells me that NASA uses the Aztec calendar, which is what we just saw, the image there, instead of the Gregorian calendar. Why is that?
It's more accurate.
Thank you. I think we're ready.
Well, why don't we use it if it's more accurate?
Why don't we use the metric system?
So
People won't accept that.
So you're saying that on a NASA, on a document, it'll have a date on there, and we won't really know what it is because we won't be able to.
I don't know how
it'll say 246 AZ, like
I don't know how they do
Aztec,
that. But when they program it in.
Their computers themselves are running on Aztec time?
Mm-hmm. Because it's more exact.
We'll have to check my friend Tommy when I go to Florida to find him, to see what he says about that. This is a necklace of human Here we are today at the Zimmerman Library on the campus of the University of New Mexico, and we're going to go in and check out some of the books on Thunderbird. But one of the things I wanted to mention while I was thinking about it was this was an idea that I picked up at a book here about Thunderbirds, which is that you can never see the Thunderbird whole in vision or in reality or in dream. You're only going to see a part of it, which actually lends a lot of credence to the idea that this phenomenon is a shape-shifting phenomenon in which you may see the Mothman, you may see an elemental, you may see an alien, you may see a UFO, Bigfoot, Black Panther, but that's not the totality of the Thunderbird. In fact, it's beyond. I mean, what it is the Indian legends are an allegory for the nature of reality. It's a very Buddhistic way of looking at things, which is that, you know, there's no way to comprehend reality in its totality. You're only going to see a picture of it at any given moment. And once you apprehend that particular aspect of it, it will change on you. And you'll have to re-apprehend it in a new way, coming down the line somewhere in time. Not only do you see the Mothman in Native American museums and things, but you also see it depicted in popular culture. Here we have an example of graffiti art. One of the books that I came across at the University of New Mexico Library was this one called American Indian Myths and Legends, co-edited by Alfonso Ortiz, who happens to be a friend of my mother-in-law's. Another little coincidence. There's 3 stories in here that I find interesting. One is called Wakinyan Tonka, the Great Thunderbird. Wakinyan Tonka being the name, the Sioux name for the Thunderbird. The description in here of the Great Thunderbird is that his body has no form, meaning you can't really see his body, but he has giant wings with 4 joints and no feet, which I think is consistent with the Mothman stories. No one ever really sees his feet. He sort of shuffles along, but no one can really remember what kind of feet he had. His claws, no head, which is exactly like the illustration on the Coleman book that Linda Scarberry said was so accurate. You know, it doesn't seem to have a head or a neck. You know, the wings just sort of come up over, and the eyes are just sort of in there in the wings. And he has rows of pointed teeth, which might explain why there were animal mutilations going on in Point Pleasant at the time of the Mothman. Another thing that Lame Deer mentions is that you often can't see the Wood Kenyan, but you can feel them. You can feel their presence. Linda Scarberry has talked about this aspect of it, and I think also my sister and niece have mentioned this as well. For those who are doing a vision quest, trying to get a vision of the Wakinyan, the Thunderbird, the Mothman, you'll have to spend 4 days and nights alone in the forest. And when the Wakinyan comes, he will frighten you. But his ultimate purpose isn't to hurt you. In fact, Lame Deer says that he turns out to be a protector. And a lot of the native boys, you know, want to have a vision of him because he's such a great protector. Here's an interesting passage from Lame Deer's discussion of the Wakinyan Thunderbird. It says, everything in nature moves in a certain way that the whites call clockwise. Only the Thunderbeings move in a contrary manner, counterclockwise. That's their way. They do everything differently. That's why if you dream of the Wakinyan, you become a Heyoka, an upside down, hot, cold, forward, backward man. This gives you power, but you don't want to stay Heyoka for long, so we have a ceremony through which you become your old self again. This reminds me, soon after myself and Tommy had our experiences, that I changed quite a bit in terms of my personality and became much more of a person in school who went against the grain, and it was almost, just something I couldn't really control. But according to Lame Deer, that's a common thing that might happen. And it's also interesting that after not being that open to him at age 8, when Tommy experienced his sightings, I did actually have my sighting around the age of 14, I think, which is the time when a vision quest or a teenage ritual would be called for in many traditions, especially the African and Native American traditions. That's when the boy has to go out, or in the Australian tradition where the boy has to go on a walkabout and undergo a fearful experience. It's almost as if the Wakenyan came back to me again 6 years later to teach me another lesson and send me on my next journey. Illustration that accompanies the Lame Deer story. The next story in the book from Lame Deer is the one about Devil's Tower, where he explains that Devil's Tower was created when two boys were being attacked by a bear, and since they couldn't run, this tower of basalt rose up and took them up to where they were away from the bear and safe. The problem was, since they were on top of this mountain, there was no way to get down. So the story kind of ends there, in that you see the Wakenyan, or you see the bear or the Bigfoot, and you experience the fear, and you may find a way to get away from it temporarily, but the problem still remains. That experience has to be integrated, which brings us to the very next story in the book, which is probably why it's the very next story, which is called The Flying Head. I think I mentioned it yesterday, but it's an Iroquois story about a woman who has this flying head. There's a flying head terrorizing the village. Now, the description of this flying head, even though it's called a flying head, it's very similar to the Wakenyan, which supposedly didn't have a head. But what they really meant in the first story was that it didn't have a neck, and the wings seemed to cover the head or go around the head. And the same description is found in the flying head story. They just call this big set of wings a flying head. There's really no head there, though. It's just a big set of wings that was terrorizing an Iroquois village, completely different part of the country in the Northeast, whereas the Sioux are in the Badlands of South Dakota. Well, the solution to the problem of seeing the entity is explained in the flying head. This village woman she tells everyone to leave, and she's going to allow this flying head, this Mothman bird-like thing, to come down, and it also has these gnarly teeth. She hides out in her, or she just hangs out in her teepee and waits for it to come, and then she acts like she's eating these hot rocks, and she's saying, "Oh, this is really good stuff," and she turns it sideways and makes it look like she's eating the rock, but she's really just throwing it back. And this makes the Mothman want to come in and eat the rocks, and he does, and he's tricked. And he, leaves them alone after that. There's no more baby stealing or whatever it is that was going on. And that is sort of the solution, and it's one that that Rob Godby talked about when he was doing his explanation of the Go game, is that you allow the attacker to come in, and then you have a way of so you're facing it, you're facing the integration process, allowing it to come in, and then using your wits to turn the energy back around on it. Here's the image accompanying the flying head story. This is the illustration accompanying the next story, which is the severed head. Here's a Hopi story about a man-eagle, a frightful monster which was seizing people. In this Hopi story, this man-eagle, which really sounds a lot like the Mothman as well, he's been flying through the air. What does it say here at the beginning? He's got sharp talons, seizes women and girls, wives and maidens, flies off with them, where he abuses them for 4 nights before eating them. In this story, it's a pretty long story, but essentially the same message, which is that this person called Son of Light, who is a person who's trying to protect the Indians from the man-eagle monster, engages the man-eagle in various tests and cleverly figures out ways to level the playing field, because the man-eagle continues to give him tests which are rigged in the man-eagle's own favor. So similar idea of using the attacker's momentum against them. The ending of the story is pretty interesting in that once the Son of Light defeats the man-eagle, all the previous people who the man-eagle had abducted were brought back to life, which has a timeless feel to it, in that it's sort of a perpetual process going on, and whenever someone is victorious in it and does a good job of integrating and repelling the frightfulness of the monster, so to speak, that has a ripple effect in time, backwards and forwards, and allows others to heal. Here we are at the Maxwell Museum of Anthropology on the University of New Mexico campus. Here are 2 bird images in a pot from 1000 AD. One can see here in this depiction of a 3 million year old woman that perhaps the Bigfoots are projections of ancient humans still living on, perhaps in another dimension, and making trips back and forth into our dimension. Here's the image. Looks pretty close to a Bigfoot to me. A lot of people have these Asian Mothman masks in their homes, and they don't even realize it. Here we are in the Albuquerque airport. Everywhere you go, you see representations of the connection between the bird and the man. Here's one of them from the Native American tradition. This is called Dream of Flight by Lincoln Fox of Santa Fe. Synchronicities play an important role in the Mothman phenomenon, and as I was reading here in the airport waiting on a plane, I was reading from Maxwell Freedom Long's book on the Kahuna religion of Hawaii. And he says, this is one of the great secrets of all time, the fact of the higher self and its standing within and above us as a God and a representative of universal God. We need not struggle to conceive the nature of universal God. All that is needed is that we recognize the high self as it is and address our prayers to it. In its superior wisdom, it may be depended on to pass on any prayer request or prayer force to higher beings in the ascending scale of growth and evolution. Once recognized for what it is, the higher self will be ever ready to accept the invitation to guide and help us, but it must be recognized and invited. For it is bound by some law of its own level not to take from the low and middle selves the gift of free will, which allows us to learn by experience, after deciding for ourselves what we will or will not do. Certainly the Mothman is a form of the higher self and should be recognized as such. One of the other ideas I had to do with yesterday, I went into the University of New Mexico looking for some information on the Mothman and came up with zilch on the Mothman. But what I did find, and this is emblematic of the phenomenon, is that you don't usually get what you're not expecting. There was an exhibition of atomic bomb research in the University Anthropology Museum, and one of the images they had there was of Oppenheimer with his bicycle, and the caption underneath had to do with one of the menial workers there at the Trinity site when the bomb was first developed, who had never seen a thin European bicycle like Oppenheimer's. And this guy had a real interesting spirit to him. He just went up and asked Oppenheimer if he could ride his bike. He felt like it was more important for him to experience that bike than to be concerned about Oppenheimer's status. So from that day on, whenever Oppenheimer would eat lunch, this fellow would ride Oppenheimer's bike around the base. Reminded me of when I was working on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in Austin, Texas in 1987, 86, 87, 87. And Dennis Hopper was in the movie, and this was before Blue Velvet had come out, and he wasn't really famous. His career had not jump-started again, and so everyone wasn't really paying attention to him, and I barely knew who he was, but I ate lunch with him every day. For some reason, just no one else ate lunch with him, so I would always sit down and we had these amazing conversations about reality and everything else, just daily life. And within a few months, Blue Velvet came out, and it was really a movie that really impacted me, and it's just one of those little synchronicities having to do with lunchtime. Hi, we're back here in Seattle after our 2003 addendum to the 2002 Mothman tour, discovering the principles behind the Mothman phenomenon. One of the first things I did when I got back here from Albuquerque was to go to the Burke Museum at the University of Washington. It's a natural history museum with a heavy focus on Native Americans, and they have a totem pole exhibition there now, and the totem pole that they have out in front of the building is of the Zunukwa, of the Kwakwatcha tribe of British Columbia. And the Zunukwa is a totem pole that is modeled after a female Sasquatch, and she holds two objects in her hands in the totem pole. It's interesting, this totem pole. It's what it has to do with is it has to do with a repayment of debt. If you owe something to the tribe that you're not repaying, they will put the Zunukwa totem pole near your house and point it at your house until the payment is made, at which time they will turn the totem pole toward the sea to signify that the debt has been repaid. It's interesting in terms of, since there is a connection between Bigfoot, UFOs, Mothman, it's interesting that these stories, what these stories are about, these stories about the Sasquatch illuminate parts of the human psyche, just as the Thunderbird stories illuminate a related part of the human psyche, and sometimes they intertwine. In this case, one of the elements of my trip that I was thinking about quite a bit was the repayment of debt. And in fact, that was the argument I used. I was having difficulty getting my sister to talk about her experiences with Mothman on tape. So, my assertion was that, if you've been through this experience, you almost need to, at some point, give back to the community in a sense, because there are going to be other people coming along who will be experiencing it and will be traumatized by it, because an experience with one of these entities is frightening, and some people can't make it through. And if they have books and movies and documentaries, articles that they can turn to get more information on it, well, that's a wonderful thing. I know at least one, actually two experiencers from Woodward Drive who seem to exhibit post-traumatic stress disorder. It's hard to pinpoint exactly where it comes from, but something tells me that intuitively that it has to do with these otherworldly events. Another thing that I came across when I was at the Burke Museum was I got a lead on this article by Steve Mizrach, where he talks about Thunderbird and Trickster, the link between the Thunderbird and the Trickster in Native American mythology. He starts off by making it clear that the Thunderbird is an allegory. It's not meant to be a literal bird. It's supposed to be a spiritual bird that can cross dimensions. It says here that the Plains Indians believed that everything was found in nature, and it had a human representative in microcosm. So everything in nature often contained its own opposite polarity, hence the expected existence of beings such as contraries, women who were warriors, and bird ashes, which are gender benders. Because the Thunderbird in particular represented this mysterious dual aspect of nature, manifest through the primordial power of thunderstorms, it is not surprising that the Thunderbird's representatives were the Heyoka, or sacred clowns, who displayed wisdom through seemingly foolhardy action. Western thinking has prevented us from seeing the reasons why Indians perceived this connection. Few anthropologists have sought to locate how Thunderbird may have been mythologically linked to Trickster. In Plains tribes, the Thunderbird is sometimes known as Wakinyan, from the Dakota word kinyan, meaning winged, and from the word Wakan, meaning sacred power. So the Thunderbird is sacred power on wings. In many stories, the Thunderbird is thought of as a great eagle who produces thunder from the beating of his wings and flashes lightning from his eyes. It's interesting that the great eagle is also at the center of a lot of Latin American cosmologies, like those written about by Carlos Castaneda. Castaneda has written extensively about the great eagle and how it is the spirit that everyone meets after death, and it sort of processes your soul, burns away the chaff, or reintegrates you with the cosmic energy. In the Castanedan tradition, which has been shown to be more Huichol Indian than Yaqui Indian, you want to try to build in your life a double body that can sneak by the eagle, and so that the eagle will eat or devour the part of you that was human, and the part of you that can move on into the other realms sneaks by. if you don't develop this double body, your whole soul gets recycled. So it's similar to enlightenment in the sense that you're trying to not come back to an earthly body. The fact that thunderbirds sometimes appear as something that terrorizes and plagues Indians, and sometimes as their protector and liberator, it is said to reflect the way thunderstorms and violent weather are seen by Plains people. On the one hand, they bring life-giving rain. On the other hand, they bring hail, flood, and lightning and fire. It is not clear where with them worship and awe end, and fear and terror begin. Some Indians claim that there are good and bad thunderbirds, and that these beings are at war with each other. Largely, I suspect that this dual nature of the thunderbird ties it to the trickster figure in Indian belief. Like the trickster, the harm the thunderbird causes is mostly because it is so large and powerful and primeval. Later in the article, Ms. Ratch writes, clowning, like the icon of the thunderbird, could be found in almost every North American Indian society. In every case, it involved ridiculous behavior, but on the Plains, it especially exhibited inversion and reversal as elements of satire. There were 4 types of clown societies: age-graded societies, military societies, the Northern Plains type, and the Heyoka shamanistic societies. The behaviors of all the clowns revolved around a few basic themes: burlesque, mocking the sacred, playing pranks, practical jokes, making obscene jokes or gestures, caricatures of others, exhibiting gluttony or extreme appetite, strange acts of self-mortification or self-deprecation, and taunting of enemies or strangers. The Heyoka, the 4th group, is the group that you would belong to if you had seen a vision of the Thunderbird. And it says here that the Heyoka were different in 3 primary ways from the other clowns. They were truly unpredictable and can do the unexpected or tasteless even during the most solemn of occasions. The other 3 groups would only do their clowning in certain ceremonies, but the Heyoka could do it at any time. More so than other clowns, the Heyoka really seemed to be insane. Also, they were thought to be more inspired by transhuman supernatural forces and to have a closer link to Wakan, or sacred power, than the other clowns. And lastly, they kept their role for life, whereas the other 3 groups could leave the society. The Heyoka was considered a sacred calling, which could not be given up without performing an agonizing ritual of expiation. Not surprisingly, these unique differences were seen as the result of their having visions of Thunderbird, a unique and transforming experience. While clown societies were found throughout the Plains, the Heyoka were usually few in number, but were found in almost every clan. Heyoka were contraries, often speaking and walking backwards. They acted in ridiculous, obscene, and comical ways, especially during sacred ceremonies. They were thought to be fearless and painless, able to seize a piece of meat out of a pot of boiling water. They often dressed in a bizarre and ludicrous manner, wearing conical hats, red paint, a bladder over their head to simulate baldness, and bark earrings. The Heyoka was thought to usually carry various sacred items. His anti-natural nature was thought to be shamanistic in origin, and as a contrary, he was expected to act silly and foolhardy during battle. However insulting or sacrilegious Heyoka actions might be, they were tolerated, since it was assumed that they were acting on the higher and more inscrutable imperatives of the Great Mystery. Heyoka were freed from all the ordinary constraints of life, and thus were usually not expected to marry, have children, or participate in the work of the tribe. Despite their bizarre acts, such as dressing in warm clothes during summer or wearing things inside out, Heyoka were trusted as leaders, healers, interpreters of dreams, and people of great medicine. Whenever they interrupted the solemnity of a ceremony, people took it as an admonition to see beyond the literalness of the ritual and into the deeper mysteries of the sacred. Like the flash of lightning, the Heyoka's sudden outbursts and disturbances are thought to be the keys to enlightenment, much like the absurd acts of Zen masters in Japan. The Heyoka reminds his people that the primordial energy of nature is beyond good and evil. It doesn't correspond to human categories of right and wrong. It doesn't always follow our preconceptions of what is expected and proper. It doesn't really care about our human woes and concerns. Like electricity, it can be deadly dangerous or harnessed for great uses. If we're too narrow or parochial in trying to understand it, it will zap us in the middle of the night. Like any good trickster, the Heyoka plays pranks on others in his culture, not to make them feel embarrassed and stupid, but to show them ways that could start being more, perhaps, smart. And I just thought I would share this letter from Harriet that she wrote on the 1-year anniversary of our contacting each other once again. In it, she says she had a vivid, spontaneous memory of the creature she saw on Woodward Drive. This was the clearest visual I've had since my initial hypnotherapy session. Very vivid details of the face. There's what appears to be an almost coffee stain on the face. The base color of the face is what I'd call putty or a dingy caulking material. The skin is porous and seems to have texture like someone who had bad acne at some earlier time. It's odd what triggered this memory. Someone sitting in front of me in class had the brown color of the cloak of the alien that I saw. I wish you were here. I'm not at all freaked out by this, but seem instead to welcome the vision for further exploration. She says that the odd, strong odor came back to me. It was overwhelming. It was a musty, twiggy, woodsy, mossy smell. But at the same time, unlike anything I had encountered before. The odor itself was hypnotizing. The interesting thing about the smell factor that Harriet mentions in her letter is that I was just back revisiting the energy field, as we've seen here in May 2003. And one of the things that wasn't on the video, but I noticed was when I went by the spot where Harriet had seen her creature, there was a definite smell at this spot, and some others were with me, and they noted that smell as well. It was a cucumber, it was a mossy cucumber smell. Another interesting thing was that when I got to Harriet's office in Columbus, I smelled the same smell on her. It was as if she was recreating that same smell from that spot. It reminded me of a story I recently heard about experiments that were done to recreate the most attractive smell to the opposite sex. And for women, it was a cucumber-based smell with something else, which I can't remember, but it had cucumber as its base smell. Perhaps there's something about this spot on the lane that, with its cucumber smell, because there were no crops nearby. This is a very steep part of the hill. Nothing but trees and brush. But the smell was really just, and it was there for several days that I was there. This could be the same smell, and my sister Loretta even remarked that the smells really reminded her of childhood. So what role smell plays is an interesting one, because it helped to bring the memories back to Harriet. She said she heard a voice in her letter. It was telepathic, strong and commanding, directing me to urgently leave at once with this being. She felt paralyzed, she couldn't move, and her feet were glued to the blacktop, like referring back to her sighting. Here she includes an image of the being. It seemed to glide through the air, spoke to me without moving its mouth, telepathically trying to get her to come with him. When I saw this, I saw this image of the Flatwoods Monster on eBay, a little doll that they make in honor of the Braxton County Monster. I sent it to Harriet because it seemed to resemble her drawing, and she goes, "Oh my God, that's the thing that I saw." So what we have here is Harriet seeing the Braxton County Monster of 1952 again in 1967. I just thought I would do a product link here. This is a hat that I found in Albuquerque when I was there. Let's get a close-up of it. This is your 3 shaman. It's interesting that I was given this necklace from Harriet. And these could be the same 3 shaman that visited me in my dream after, or actually before I read a book about these 3 shaman and how they help to enable people to heal in their dreams and become healers in their dreams for other people. So if someone were to ask me now, what is this story all about, I would sort of sum it up probably by saying that as a child I was exposed to a phenomenon via another child, via making a shrine to the Mothman, my friends seeing the Mothman and aliens and saucers, and me seeing a strange elemental being and having nightmares about men in black and saucers and aliens and Bigfoots, and having dreams where I felt like I was the Mothman. Having another friend see an alien at that same spot. Having sisters with psychic powers, a niece that has seen the Mothman in her bedroom in the early 90s, a sister who's seen the Mothman within the last 2 years in her bedroom. These are people who, in the case of my relatives, aren't really interested that much in the Mothman story. I try to get them to read, the books and things, and it's not something they're really interested in. It's just that when they talk about their experiences, they're describing the Mothman, and they could care less, in a way, what other people might say about the Mothman. They have their own relationship to it. The experience changed my being, and I let it go at that. And for many years, thought nothing of it, other than to think that I had a slightly unusual upbringing. A lot of the conscious understanding of this phenomenon didn't come until I was older. However, some things happened in 1981 that carried me further with this. One of them was seeing Harriet again out of the blue, and having her tell me that my father had said that I had a protector. And not knowing what that meant, but being stimulated by it, and being led actually at that point to do a series of photographs where I traveled around the country, dressed as a Mothman-like figure who was sort of a terrorist and sort of sort of an intruder, an outsider to the norm, sort of a Heyoka figure, and having people respond most to that series, probably than anything else I've ever done. And then wondering about that, what was it that made that series? What was I doing? And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I was doing with that series, and how it may have connected up with finding Harriet again in 1981. But like a lot of things in this in the story, you just sort of take it in, forget about it, and move on. And so, whereas it took 13 years for me to move from seeing the vision of exploding buildings in the year 2001, as I did in 1967, move forward, well, actually 68, move forward 13 years, and I'm once again reintegrated with the phenomenon via Harriet, and I'm doing an art work, doing a series of images that relate to those earlier events. And then 13 years later, in 1994, finding the John Keel book, The Mothman Prophecies, and beginning to really understand what had happened. Coming forward to the year 1999 when WTO happened, and I went with a DJ Novocaine, Ben Camp, and that was a sort of a magical experience in that the values that I had taken on as a Heyoka, the values of the left and the values of the 60s that I sort of picked up as a youngster were brought to fruition at WTO, and I was able to experience a sense of freedom. And oddly enough, the standoff with police occurred at 905 East Pine in Seattle, which is the only paranormal spot in the state of Washington mentioned in one of Lauren Coleman's early books, and Lauren being the latest author of a Mothman book. So we move forward then to the year 2001 and the events of September 11th, bringing to my conscious mind some unconscious sensations that I needed to contact Tommy to find out if he, if this meant something to him, and finding out that I had a buried memory of a vision of 911 from 1967, wanting to some verification on these things. But then in the year 2002, going back, having a whole series of synchronous events happen while visiting West Virginia, experiencing the energy field, the precognitions or postcognitions, whatever they were, the bizarre connections with the lady that we stayed with, and how her daughter had owned Harriet's house, finding out more about the national security implications with Sugar Grove, and Harriet remote viewed it and felt that there was a submarine submarine operation going on. And then I'll just throw in here that just last week I did a search on Sugar Grove and found out that it is indeed the command center for, in fact, the whole Navy. The base commander of Sugar Grove is the third in command, beneath the director of the Navy and the assistant director of the Navy. Experiencing these synchronous events, doing a video about it, having that video generate quite a bit of response. Our rough draft of the 2002 tour actually caused Harriet to be besieged by Men in Black, wanting to, doing all the classic Men in Black things, smelling strange, acting funny, walking funny, asking probing questions about the family, frightening Harriet, saying that they had spoken to me when they had not. I think these things have brought me full circle in understanding that the phenomenon is a way of the unconscious to reach its higher self, to make itself more creative, to if these visions come from outside or inside doesn't matter as much as that they do occur, and that the unconscious makes it happen, and that we see it as the unconscious, as that that we see it as our higher selves and not as something outside of ourselves. And I just think these are tremendous lessons, gifts of life. Understanding that the protector is within all of us, residing in our higher selves. And as we face difficult times ahead, as mankind, humankind, pushes itself to the limits once again, that this protector will manifest from our higher selves once again, and that it can. And that we do that with awareness and neutrality. Not wanting to harm others, not wanting to be warlike, wanting to, as DJ Elario would say, rest at night and dream during the day. Here we've got the soldier of the future. The other thing we were talking about was along the lines of this fake alien invasion, you would need, it's almost, you can almost see it as an organism. You know, it's easy to think of a fake alien invasion as just a conceptual plot by some generals in the Pentagon or something. But you can actually see it as a function of the organism as a whole, the human organism. If an entity wanted to take over the entire sphere of human existence, if a one world government wanted to take over, they would, in order to unify everyone's minds enough to make that work, enough of the people, to get enough of the people to believe in the one world, they would have to have a +1 or second entity that was attacking. And this is where we got into the 0 and the +1 idea, which you find the binary code in the computer. This +1 in the mental structure of the human mind is an important one. You've got the sense of me, the world, the one world government, and the human mind is incapable of really experiencing infinity or conceiving of infinity. So what it always does is it just goes, here's infinity, here's the world that I know, and there's a +1 over here. There's a, you can jump from that to another place, but you can't go to infinity. The human mind just can't start and go and never stop with a thought. It has to go so far and stop, and then do a +1 and go on to the next spot, and where it stops and does it again, and on and on and on. So the computer works very much like the human mind. But it's also the essence of Buddhistic duality. It shows that how duality, that example shows how duality is such a core part of existence. The human mind can't just think of oneness without any boundaries. It can only think of this much +1. It can only think of duality. The human mind can only conceive dualities. Which is why the human mind must be bypassed in order for the subconscious and the higher self to unify. Because you've got the higher self, subconscious, and the conscious mind in the center blocking the communication. This is a typical kahuna or huna explanation of the mind. You have to get the conscious mind to stop in order for the other two to unify and for the whole organism to reach its own self-realization. Stopping the mind can be lots of things. It can be meditation, focus to a degree to where the conscious mind stops. It can be a shock. It could be a shock like seeing the Mothman or a Bigfoot or Thunderbird. Ultimately, any stories that you've made up about your life and what it means are meaningless and don't actually exist. So, as part of the awakening process, it would be important to take this entire Mothman experience, make an explanation for it, and then let go of the explanation. So, as we look at aspects of our own culture, our own selves, our own higher selves, and what it is that we are doing to protect ourselves, what is it in us that is the protector? It's the ability to adapt, to always remain fluid, to remember, that to plan for contingencies, to plan for things that are awry, to always be ready for something to go wrong, and in fact to simulate it, in order to keep the energy alive, to keep the awareness alive. Life is such that you just can't grow stagnant. I mean, you can try, but you're really just fighting reality, because reality is always changing. The minute you think you have this phenomenon down, it changes, and it forces your mind to adapt, or else not survive. So I think it's the protector is that innate that we have inside us, that heals us, that protects us, that keeps us alive, that figures out ways to solve problems. So I think as we reach more of a cataclysmic time, that you're going to see more people manifest the Heyoka by seeing the Thunderbird, and then by helping to transform society into a more just solving problems. I think this is what I sense it in certain people that I've met in this phenomenon, like Rob Gobby, who's a person who's thought deeply about how can we make the educational system better, because that's really the root of survival, is how you educate your children, how the society educates itself. And once that breaks down, then you're on the road to problems. So the protector is that part of us that needs to be recognized and understood, and the values of protection, the values of survival need to be, understood, and that's the value of the myth, I think.
Andy, get out from under there.
So while Tim was in the Coast Guard office, where we had to undergo a retinal or face recognition camera and state that we were not carrying weapons, I was out here, and I was sitting here looking at the viaduct. Let's get a shot of the viaduct. A shot of the Seattle viaduct there. I was thinking, man, if there was an earthquake now, would this viaduct, if it were to fall completely this way, would it actually reach me here in the car? I was trying to get a visual on that. And just as I said that, or thought that, the train goes by, and written on the side of the train it says, "Andy, get out from under there." I'm not kidding. I actually have a still shot of it in here. And in fact, as the train backs up, I think you're probably going to see it again here in a minute. So that's just one small example of the weirdness that you come across, the little synchronicities when you're doing a Mothman research project. What could that mean? Could that mean that, is that phrase going to come up again? If you saw the Mothman movie as you did, you know that you can get a divine message via the telephone or via some synchronous way, synchronous medium, a vision, a phone call, a visit from a man in black, and a phrase or something can be uttered that will come up later. If you refer to the movie, the Mothman movie, which was fictional in many ways, she has a dream about being number 37. And the voice is telling her, wake up, number 37. And then when the bridge collapses at the end of the movie, she's the 37th person, or would have been the 37th victim had Keel not been there, or Klein, as he's called in the movie. The star Richard Gere was able to save her because he knew what was going on. And through the awareness of the process, he was able to save her, and in essence himself. It's gum. Pardon the gum there. So when you see a phrase like this, you wonder, okay, well, in 20 years, am I gonna, be caught under something, or, that kind of thing, Is that like some You know, or is it an event that is happening out there? You happen to see it, and it happens to program your consciousness in some way. Oh, I saw that phrase at that moment when I was thinking about something falling. Did I manifest that? Did I pick up on the fact that image was going to go by me? Did my higher self know that was going to occur before it happened? So hence I started thinking about a collapse of something. You know, how much does the mind really know? You know, the mind could be aware of so much more stuff that's going on than my conscious mind is aware of. So even though I'm sitting here, my mind could have been down the track a little bit, seeing what was on the train. Part of my consciousness could know that message was coming up. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's a prophecy. And I guess if you look at the phenomenon, you sort of see that you have a role in how that comes out. So if you think it's going to be a horrible tragedy, it might be. If you can see it in other ways, then you can change that through awareness. So like I was saying earlier about identity, and identity as a Heyoka, or identity as a sacred clown who had maybe seen a vision of the Mothman or the Thunderbird. That's an identity that's just a conceptualization of the phenomenon, and therefore it's a temporary nothingness that needs to be let go of. In the same way, when a little prophetic moment happens like that, you also have to let go of those, and that actually occurs when you integrate it, when you accept it. You know, when you accept the fact that when you accept the dark side, so to speak, the tragedy, you know, the being trapped or get out from under there, that kind of, what that symbolizes is the dark. It's a fear of the unknown. It's a fear of demise, fear of death, and that's always there. The subconscious, in this case, needs to be acknowledged. If we use the triune example here, you see the image that talks about entrapment. Your conscious mind, if your conscious mind can let go of that concept, then the subconscious can connect with the higher self and move it, and move the energy, or let the energy flow through. Like any trauma, anything can become a trauma. It can be an event or a thought, and this is what causes, and when people hold on to traumas, they store themselves in the body, and then this is what causes illness. So really the key to good health is this ability to let go, the Buddhists refer to as non-grasping. How do you feel about this little synchronicity?
It's pretty baffling, I think. I mean, why in the hell would that be written on the side of a train anyway? You know, I can't think of any other. I can't think of any reason why that would be written on the side of a train.
You know, a phrase like that can also refer to a mental state.
Yeah, sure.
You know, Andy, get out from under that. It could be some agreement I've made with myself at the subconscious level that needs to be let go of. I mean, essentially, that's like a message from God saying, "Andy, let go of that." That's like the Buddha saying, "Let go of that. Let go of that. Let go of all grasping." The key to enlightenment, in fact. That's it in a nutshell. To let go of everything. Okay, coming up next, we visit once again with Kenny Alton. I gave Kenny some photos that I had taken on the May trip to Woodward Drive. I had heard that his grandmother, the shaman from the Philippines, was a card reader, and so I figured maybe Kenny has the same abilities. Well, it appears that he does, because he was quite correct on many of the photos. For instance, he points to the Magic Island photo, which is where I had the precognition of someone drowning, as the death card. He calls it the death card. Also, he identifies the spot where we saw the energy field in 2002 and where we saw the various beings in 1967 as the crossroads. There's my mother and her sister. They saw a glowing object when they were children. Kenny has no overall statement, so we're going to go individually to the photos.
Future Site Family Life Center. Something going on there. This is a scary house. Abduction house. Crossroads. Death. Control, manipulation, fear. Denial. Something going on there. Something that does not want to be told. This is the crossroads. Something really deep in there. I don't know what that's. I know what that is. Don't know what that is. Don't know what that is. Well, this is the death card. And this is the crossroads. Decisions had to be made there. What decisions? I'm not, or a lack of decisions. A lack of decisions.
Wow.
What?
So the overarching word or statement for this?
This is the moment of denial or lack of reflection. There's something known here that needs to be told, but nobody wants it to be revealed, and I'm not quite sure why nobody wants it to be revealed. But this is like a major crossroads. This is a lot of decisions and mostly lack of decisions have not been made, and you're given something here, and one has to face it. As you know, this and you're faced with this here. You know, you're either gonna. This is the crossroads, and you either have death, and it could go either way. You could either go denial or death. Not necessarily that death is a bad thing. It could be moved up here, or you can move up. Move up.
Is there any explanations you can give about tarot that would help people who don't know anything about it know what you're?
I don't really know much about it myself. Just a little I
Oh, really?
goofed around with, but.
Well, you don't have to conceptualize too much. That's fine. I mean, I think it's good that you're just sort of intuitive.
Well, I think intuitively you could do that with anything. You could do it, you know, how one opens up a book. You know, as above, so below. As Goethe would say, you could open this fairy tale book and read a passage as long as you're approaching it with, you know, like you said, with the prana energy or whatever energetic approach you're having. It you could take anything. Even in astrological situations, why not have what's above be a reflection of what's below? As long as you approach it with that intent, you could do it with anything. You could do it with a kid's book. You could do it with photographs. You could do it with astrology. You could do it with tarot. But have that intent, and you know, I do a lot of things. I do it with Rumi poems, or I do it with songs, or I do it with signs that are out in this world driving down the street. And so you just pick up something, and that's just kind of the energetic feel that I got from that. I'm not quite sure what it means, but
well, I'll start giving you some more details here and see what happens. This card is indeed the death card. This is where I saw them pulling the guy out of the river after I'd had the precognition of it.
Okay.
When we were standing in the energy field here, where's my camera?
This is
where we were standing in the energy field right down here. Later that night, I had a vision of a death here.
It's whacked.
This spot here is where Tommy saw the flying saucer. Well, this was his yard, so it would have been parked right there.
So, you know, you're all faced with these decisions that one has to, what one visualizes and how one visualizes what one saw.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, Einstein, the greatest thinker, said, you know, we have one question that needs to be answered. When he was dying, and all these scientists said we got to have these questions to give to him, and we should have this symposium and ask him these questions, but they kept fighting over what the questions were going to be. Nobody could make decisions on what they should ask this, you know, incredible person's intelligence and utilize that before he dies. And so one guy said, well, why don't we just ask Einstein what we should ask him? And he said, there's only one question, and that question is whether you feel that the world is one of good or one of evil.
This is where, remember I told you that I was a panther? I remember I said that I told you that about the panther sighting, the Black Panther sighting.
Oh yeah.
This is where it was.
Oh really?
Okay.
Well, yeah, there's something.
And you had speculated that it was some part of
something deep in there. Is what I said.
But you had said something was. You had said that it was a part of me that they were seeing, they could have been seeing or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean.
Well, it turns out that I'm a panther in the Cherokee Cherokee
right.
calendar.
Huh. Well, yeah. It's like digging into yourself, and
because I never saw it. I never saw the panther, so it indeed could have been part of me projecting out there that others were seeing. Because it's really clear that I'm the only one that didn't see it. And for the other people to have seen it, it doesn't make sense because you wouldn't see a panther in there. It's too thick. So to me, it's like some cosmic sighting that they had or feeling that they had about me as a panther, or maybe it wasn't me, but it seems like a cosmic event, not a real sighting of something.
Yeah, I mean, it's the depth illogical. Of view that needs to be exposed, needs to be revealed, and until, you know, it's like the daemon of you, until you self-actualize that, it's going to come out in other areas. It's going to come out in that projection, and other people are going to see it. But you're the one who's going to have to, go, like I said, go deep in there, go deep into your interior, and discover it, and face it, or it's going to be leaking out, and you're never going to have glimpses of it. Everybody else will, but you're never going to have glimpses of it.
Well, it says that the panther is like Moses leading people to great spiritual insights, but he doesn't get there himself. He doesn't make it to the promised land himself.
Well, geographically, he never made it to the promised land.
Right.
I mean,
we're still, I guess.
But he was there pretty much. Obviously, if he.
So more stuff. This is the church. This is the crossroads. Actually, the physical crossroads is the church here, and there was a view from. Here's the view from the church. So right up here on this hill is where the Tommy's house was and the UFO in the yard, and the road that we actually walk up to, that you go up to get to the energy field, is right up there, past Mrs. Atkins' old house. Oops.
Well, so it's like this church is
and
there.
That's actually a crossroads of a physical.
I'm sure they built it there as some kind of whitewash of what really needs to be seen, and because there's obviously some stuff going on there, and they feel it and they pick up on it, and it's like this kind of guard to actually go in there, and this blockage to actually visualize or experience what is in the true spiritual touch of this area, this land, or whatever's going on there. Not that I know what's going on, but
well, now the reason I included these pictures of these various churches is because I have a theory that a lot of these things are happening, that there's so many churches in the area because of this is such a highly magnetic area. This is a church. These are all on the same road, and they're all there's like half a dozen churches that you can walk to almost.
Yeah. Well, that's Jesus' story about the Samaritan woman at the well, and he talks to her, and he says, neither God will not be discovered either in the temple or the hill. It would be discovered in spirit and truth. And he's basically saying that it doesn't matter, where you worship, it's how one worships. Or how one, so here's the temple and there's the hill, and basically there's this energy that's getting flashed at everybody, and they're trying to focus it on either building a church or you're focusing on this hill, this spot, but it's really, in truth and spirit, it's really interior. And everybody's at these crossroads. We see them, this vision. Whatever that vision is, you could interpret it as Mohammedan light, or you could interpret it as the Sacred Heart, as these visions. And everybody's needs to reach this truth and spirit, but I think everybody's focusing on the hill and the temple.
Well, let's focus some more on that since we're doing it. Here's Charlie Manson's house, and right next to it is this church. Mm-hmm. So I've got several examples here that seem to connect up with this church energy.
Well, and I'm sure
not,
he picked up on that too. I mean, he probably had that, and he had the crossroads. He had to go, where am I going to go? He had to make that decision, that question that Einstein says that one needs to make, and or one needs to ask. And who knows what's going on in these, what harmonic fields are being picked up there. And
this is where the shrine was built, in this shed. Tommy's house.
See, there's all that intention. There's that intention that needs to be expressed, and it gets expressed, and the panther shows up, and so, but one needs to find it within oneself. One needs to see that panther in oneself, as opposed to.
This is where lightning, the telepathic. The telepathic Coke bottle guy, Coke collecting guy, where he hung out, right there at that church. Another church. This is where Harriet stated in second grade that Jesus was just, that it was all a myth, and that extraterrestrials were actually, we were actually seeded from extraterrestrials. That happened right there. This is where they've cloned the first, supposedly we're cloning the first human at Nitro, down the road a little bit, here in this office in the community center. Here's the female Sasquatch. This is when you saw your grandfather after he died?
Yeah, well, no, it wasn't my grandfather. It was like my mother's uncle, who was like the patriarch of my mother's family. And I had come home, and my mother was upset about something, and I had asked her a question, and she was really terse with me and didn't want to discuss it. And I could tell, couldn't tell that there was something major going on, but I thought, sometimes you needed just to avoid your mom sometimes because they get in those moods. And so I went into my room, and I just sat there, and I wonder where my dad is, because I had lost my baseball glove. I needed to talk to him, and all of a sudden I fell asleep. I could not stay awake. It was the middle of the afternoon, and I don't take naps, and I just kind of laid down, and I went into this very, very deep sleep, but somewhat wake state. I don't think I was in REM, but I was like in this weird other area. And I was sleeping, and all of a sudden I felt like this male presence come into the room and sit on my bed and started stroking my head in a very affectionate way, but I couldn't wake up. And I thought, God, that's weird. It's not my father. He usually wouldn't do something like that. And I couldn't wake up, and I was trying to wake up, and I couldn't. And it was almost like this very kind of this moment of I guess blessing, or I don't know what it was. And all of a sudden I felt like a presence passed through my body, like an energy field had passed through, and as if somebody had taken just to pinch me in the back and started pulling me through a little hole, and in the small of my back, and I couldn't breathe. All of a sudden I couldn't breathe, and I woke up, and there was no one there. And then I walked out, and I was all groggy and whacked out, and I asked my mother where my dad was, because I thought he was in the room. My mother was like, she's all pissed off at me, and she's like, leave me alone. And I was like, well, where's Dad? I need to talk to him. He was just in my room. And she's like, your dad's been at the office all day. And I was like, what? And she goes, and then she told me that, her uncle died, and this is a person who would always, like at parties, he'd always take you aside and, give you the lecture about doing the right thing, or talk to you about what's going on in your life, and, kind of the person who watched over everybody. And he had just died. And so I think he, did his visitation with me before he went on to his last kind of, as much as he could, physical visitation with me before he went out, moved on.
The reason we were talking about this sort of thing is because today Lauren Coleman sent around an email about the Mothman death list, and it reminded me as I started to think about that aspect of the phenomenon, I started thinking about the dates of when certain people had seen certain sightings, and that these seem to correspond with deaths soon thereafter, or around the time of. And like when I had my sighting, that's when my grandfather died, and my sister has a theory, which I think she talked about on the video, that he was being of Cherokee ancestry was, and based on the different dreams she's had, and she's had visions of him several times where he's come to her, like for instance when she had this terrible car wreck and was literally trapped inside the car, or the car was on her or something. I can't remember, but there was like a heavy weight on her, and they couldn't get her out. And then the grandfather Ed came to her and somehow woke her up and got her out of there. And no one knows how she got out of the car, but it was like she got lifted out of the car by something else, because no one got her out of the car, and no one saw her get out of the car. Everyone they realized she was trapped, and they turned around to like go get the car, what do you call it, the jaws of life or whatever. And they turn around and she's outside the car, and she credits grandfather Ed with this.
Mm-hmm.
So he's starting to loom a little larger in the picture, and and my own father's death, I'm trying to remember if it corresponded with anything, but he played a role in that. 20 years after he dies, or whatever it was, 10 years, he comes to send a message to me through a spiritualist who tells Harriet, and she contacts me. So this thing with the other side, has, it's part of the phenomenon. But accepting that, accepting death is like accepting life. So people that run into these kinds of experiences have a choice of how they want to interpret it, as a death sentence or as a life sentence, or a living sentence, or a heaven, or however you'd like to interpret it. Well, it's a description of duality.
Mm-hmm.
And duality is it's the guiding principle of this experience now, in this physical realm. So therefore, you can actually approach heaven through duality completely.
Mm-hmm.
But it's how you get primordial energy doesn't have to manifest itself to exist, but it does anyway. For what reason, no one knows, but these manifestations are occurring for some reason. And that reason is for the cosmos to play with itself. The energy divides itself on purpose so that another part of it can become visible. This is just what you're saying. The eyes of God see you, and you see the eyes of God.
Mm-hmm. The creation was unknown, so the Creator created creation to be known.
Can you say that 10 times fast? It's August 18th, 2003. The sniper in West Virginia is still active. We're talking here with Mercedes about a recent, what appears to be abduction. We'll have her tell the details.
All right, so Kenny and I were camping in Lake Wenatchee over this week. On Thursday night, first night we were there, we went to sleep. Both of us had a real strange night of sleep. We were planning to get up in the middle of the night and go down to the lake with Blue and go walking. It was a really big, full moon, lots of light. And in the middle of the night, I wake Kenny up and I say, "Come on, Kenny, let's go." And he says, no, I'm really, really scared. And I said, "What's going on? Why?" And he said, "I've just had a dream that we were abducted by aliens." And I was like, "Oh God, come on, let's just go to the lake." And he was really freaked out. And we had a really restless night of sleep after that. I wasn't very scared. There was the air was really still. We were in a campground. But he definitely had this feeling. And then in the morning, we get up, we go to the gas station, and I do something that I would never do, which is I forget and I leave my purse on top of the car as we drive away. And we're driving away, we get about 5 miles, and I realize I don't have it. We go back to the gas station, it's not there, and Kenny says, "Well, I think it was on top of the car," and I don't recall any of it because I never would do this. I would never lose my purse. So we drive for about 2 miles, and sure enough, we find it on the side of the road. Somebody had run over it, and all of these little pieces were all along the road, on both sides of the road for about 2 miles. We went and found like $20 bills, Kinko's cards, library cards, receipts. We found almost everything that was in the purse, even the clasp that I left there. And then later in the day, he forgets the keys, can't figure out where he put the keys. I, at moments during the day, forgot who he was. Like, I would look at him and I was like, "Who the hell are you?" And it was a very weird feeling because I've known him for so many years, and I had this very strong sensation that I did not know him. And toward the end of the day, all of these things were happening where I would leave things in places, totally forget about it. We'd have to go back miles to go get these things. And Kenny said, we finally ended up back where we started, which isn't what we expected at all, which we went back to the campsite when our plans at the beginning were to go somewhere else entirely. And they did have one more spot left, so we stayed there, and we were talking about it and realizing that during the course of the day, he and I both were forgetting things the whole day long. And he's like, well, I really feel that maybe we were abducted. I still have a hard time believing it, but I do think it's very odd. I'm not a forgetful person, certainly not short-term memory, and that whole day I just kept forgetting everything. Everything. Even him. That's it. That's the end of the story.
Now, I find this interesting because Kenny and I often joke when we're on the job, or working together on a project or something, and sort of kidding each other. And one of the things he kidded me for recently was the fact that he and I went camping once, and I was nervous that night about aliens. I just had a feeling. I was nervous. I couldn't really sleep. This was maybe 10 years ago, sort of when I had first read the Mothman prophecies and was beginning to understand that there might be something going on that I was not previously aware of. He had kidded with me about that, and now it sounds like he's, experienced it.
No, this is the day before. This is actually the day before when Mercedes kept forgetting things, forgetting who I was. She forgot her purse. Though did you tell him that I knew where it was the whole time?
I didn't tell him that part.
Well, the night before we had this dream, we were gonna go walk out in the middle of the night and go to the lake, but I was too scared because I had this dream that, what did I call it? Civil defense?
Civil defense mechanisms. That's
Civil
what these
defense
little grays
mechanisms.
were.
I was on this boat, and there's these guys, and they had captured, it's like fishing boat or something like that, and I go, well, that's not a fish, and it was like these little grays, but they weren't rounded, they were, they looked mechanical, but they were organic. They were like, they had square, rounded edges and stuff like that. They were kind of like octagonal faces, but they had the eyes, the grays and stuff. And one guy had it holding one, like with his foot, holding it down on this boat. And I go, what the hell is that? That's not a fish. He's like, yeah, this is what the government calls civil defense mechanisms. And he held it down, and he goes, I'll show you how you have to kill these things. So he did something, projected some kind of energy on it, and it started leaking this red plasma looking stuff, and it got it's like it was getting a disease or something like that. So all of a sudden I was like, whoa, that's just crazy. And then I wake up. Oh, then what happens is I'm looking at my sleeping bag, and I see these guys. I'm crouched in my sleeping bag, and there's this little hole, and they're staring at me, and all of a sudden in the dream I wake up somewhere near my neighborhood with no clothes on and just this sleeping bag, and I'm wandering around lost trying to figure out where I am. And then the next day Mercedes kept forgetting things, and she left her purse on top of the car, even though she didn't think she did, even though I knew where the purse was, and I knew that she thought it was stolen, but I knew it wasn't stolen. I knew it was on the side of the road, and I knew exactly where we had to keep walking forward, and I found it, and that's about it.
Now when you're in this hypnotic trance and you think you're conscious, you can see almost anything. These things are from outer space. There are strange things in the sky. Sky ships were taking souls away into space. And you go into a trance. You think you're conscious. You can see almost anything. There were flying saucer sightings galore. You can see almost anything. There are strange things in the sky. We haven't done searching for the string. There were flying saucer sightings galore. We have to take the little people seriously. These things are from outer space, and you're going